My name is Mackenzie Taylor, and I'm Associate Professor of Biology at Creighton University. So pollination is the transfer of pollen from one plant to another. And pollen is the part of the plant that produces the sperm. And so it's really important to get that pollen with the sperm from one plant to another so that the seeds can be fertilized and new plants can develop. And pollen is produced by all plants that make seeds. Some of those plants make flowers, and those are flowering plants or angiosperms. And some of those plants don't make flowers, and those are called the gymnosperms. And the first plants to make pollen would have been the gymnosperms. And today, these are plants like conifers, which are pines and firs, and cycads and ginkgo. And conifers and ginkgo are pollinated by the wind, but cycads are mostly pollinated by insects. And it's likely that even the cycads that lived during the time of the dinosaurs would have been pollinated by insects. We have some evidence of this. There are some thrips covered with cycad pollen from the early Cretaceous, about 100 million years ago. And there are even some earlier insects that are like earwigs that are covered with pollen from before the dinosaurs, about 280 million years ago. And that pollen is more like conifers, so maybe even the earliest conifers were pollinated in part by insects. Now these insects are probably eating the pollen, that's called pollinivory, and sort of accidentally pollinating as they move from plant to plant to eat the pollen. Flowering plants are much more associated with insect pollination. Almost all flowering plants are pollinated by animals, and this is mostly insects, but it can also be birds or bats or even lizards and rodents. And there's a lot of evidence that the earliest flowering plants were pollinated by insects, probably beetles and flies. But it's important to remember that some flowering plants are still pollinated by wind and water today, but their ancestors were probably pollinated by animals, and so these types of pollinations actually arose a little bit later.